For centuries, we've looked at the seven deadly sins like some kind of ancient moral checklist, but modern psychology, it shows us something way more profound. These aren't just moral failings. They're actually an ancient, brilliant map of human psychological flaws. They're protective strategies that have just completely spun out of control. Pride shields our insecurity, envy masks our longing, wrath guards our vulnerability. But today, in this explainer, we're looking at something far more quiet, and honestly, far more dangerous. We're looking at sloth. So let's just dive right in. Because sloth, it's really not what you think it is. It's actually the most misunderstood, insidious threat to your mind.
Moving into the illusion of laziness, I really want you to abandon that old moralistic view you might be holding on to. We're taught that sloth is simply a lack of physical energy, a lack of discipline, just a failure of character. But psychology tells us a much darker story. Sloth isn't about resting. It's not about taking a well-deserved break. It's a deeply complex psychological phenomenon. It is, at its core, a state of being completely trapped.
The difference between simple laziness and mental paralysis is actually pretty unsettling when you break it down. Look, true laziness is a choice. You choose not to act, and you actually enjoy that choice. There's no guilt. You toss your laundry next to the basket, and you simply don't care. But true sloth? It feels entirely different from the inside. It's this terrifying mental paralysis. You sit there. You stare at the task. You desperately want to act, but you're physically and mentally unable to bridge that gap between intention and action. You're just watching yourself fail to act, and all the while, you're suffocating under this immense, crushing weight of shame. You aren't resting. You're stuck.
Because this is what sloth actually is. It's a psychological freeze response. It's emotional avoidance, cleverly disguised as laziness. The dark truth here is that your mind is actually trying to protect you. Sloth is an unconscious coping strategy. Your brain encounters the world, or maybe just a single task, that suddenly feels totally insurmountable. So what does it do? It hits the emergency brake. It freezes. It numbs you. It shuts you down to protect you from distress. But as you'll see, this protection is actually a prison.
Which brings us to the trap of comfort. Let's guide ourselves downward into the actual mechanics of why we stop moving. Why exactly does the brain pull that emergency brake? What is really happening beneath the surface when we completely shut down?
Why do we freeze? It's a simple question, right? But the answer is profound. We freeze because the task in front of us is no longer just a task. It's a mirror. The paralysis starts the exact moment a task triggers deep, uncomfortable emotions. It pushes us right to the absolute edge of our emotional tolerance. So the absolutely crucial point here is this. Comfort is a trap. We so often think procrastination is just a time management flaw. We think, oh, I just need a better planner, or I need a new productivity app. But it's not a time management issue at all. It's a crisis of emotional regulation. Your brain feels the discomfort of the task, and it desperately seeks immediate relief. It wants that sweet, instant release of running away. It actively chooses the comfort of avoidance over the pain of action.
Let's look at the hidden triggers of this avoidance. We're talking about fear of failure, chronic overwhelm, perfectionism, low self-worth. When you sit down to write an email, or start a new project, or even just clean your room, you aren't just facing the work, you're facing these ghosts. If you have impossible standards of perfectionism, just starting is terrifying. If your self-worth is low, the task literally threatens to prove that you're incompetent. Your brain treats these emotional triggers as immediate physical threats, so you automatically retreat into the safety of doing nothing.
And this avoidance, it quickly builds into a vicious cycle. Step 1, you feel task anxiety. Step 2, you avoid the task for immediate relief. You get that quick hit of comfort. But then, step 3, almost instantly, you experience this crushing guilt because you know the task is still waiting for you. Which leads to step 4. That guilt causes even more anxiety, forcing you to retreat even further into paralysis. That sweet release of avoidance quickly rots. It becomes this devastating loss of internal momentum. You're just spinning your wheels in the mud, sinking deeper with every single rotation.
Now we come to escaping into tomorrow. Because to survive this overwhelming guilt, we create psychological delusions. We literally justify our passive self-destruction by inventing a fantasy. We begin escaping tomorrow through a process called temporal discounting.
Think about this phrase for a second. We outsource our pain to a stranger, our future self. This is the truly unsettling core of temporal discounting. Our brains are hardwired to value immediate relief right now over rewards in the future. But it goes way deeper than that. Psychological research shows that when we think about our future self, our brain lights up in the exact same way it does when we think about a random stranger. Your brain literally views the you of tomorrow as someone else entirely, so it becomes terrifyingly easy to pass them all your burdens.
Watch how this temporal decay actually unfolds. Look at the progression here. Now is filled with task discomfort. We reject it, so we move to tonight. We promise ourselves we'll totally have the energy later. But then tonight comes. We're tired, so we shift it to tomorrow. We rationalize the delay. Tomorrow stretches into next week. Next week stretches into eventually. And eventually is exactly where goals go to die. The illusion of later just stretches out indefinitely, and it quietly, softly drains the actual meaning from your life.
And then we tell ourselves this classic lie. You know the one, I work better under pressure. We use this common rationalization as a psychological defense mechanism. We tell ourselves we need the adrenaline of a looming deadline to slingshot us into action. But it's a mask. It hides our deep psychological stagnation and our profound fear. We're literally using panic to override our paralysis, but the cost to our nervous system is just immense.
Which leads us to the final, darkest phase, the quiet surrender, chronic avoidance. This is the long-term, chilling reality of running from your own life. This is what actually happens when sloth truly takes hold of your internal architecture.
Ask yourself this: what happens when the dopamine is gone? What happens when the adrenaline of that last-minute panic no longer works? What happens when the artificial urgency fades away and your coping mechanisms just completely break down? Well, there's a cold, empty space left behind. You can't even panic yourself into action anymore. The engine is simply flooded.
The capacity for action simply shrinks. Prolonged emotional avoidance doesn't just delay your tasks, it actually rewires you. It completely numbs your ambition. The longer you remain in a state of sloth, the smaller your world becomes. Soon, even the smallest daily actions, getting out of bed, returning a text message, taking a shower, they feel like impossible mountains. Your psychological muscles have completely atrophied.
And that's when you begin to see the signs of total surrender. You feel this constant, unearned fatigue. You're exhausted, even though you've practically done nothing. You develop a numbness to consequences. Deadlines pass, opportunities vanish, and you simply stop caring. You end up watching your own life pass by as a spectator. This is the atmospheric dread of living in a stagnant state. Your mind has been completely convinced that passivity is the absolute only safe option. You are alive, sure, but you are no longer participating in your own life.
Because the truth is, sloth rarely destroys your life all at once. It simply convinces you to wait, until there is nothing left worth waiting for.